So in this video, we're going to talk about transpose and the Gizmo tool. These are two methods of scaling and rotating and moving objects in relation to each other in ZBrush. Now, the Gizmo is brand new. Right now we're in edit mode on this character. My currently active subtool, as you can see, is the body. If I were to go to move, which the hotkey is W, or scale or rotate, you see that the gizmo becomes active now. This gizmo allows us to move, scale, and rotate the object just like you would in any other 3D program. People had been asking for a more standardized gizmo in ZBrush for a long time, so it's really exciting that we have this. If you've used any other 3D programs, it should be pretty obvious how this works. If you click and drag the outer circle, you'll rotate. If you hold down Shift while you rotate, it snaps to increments. If you were to rotate the red axis, that rotates around X. If I rotate the blue axis, that rotates around Z. Now, if I were to click and drag the scale in X, that scales. Scale in Y scales. And the yellow box in the center, uniform scales. Now, if I want to scale around two different axes, look, when I mouse over X, for example, if I hold down Alt, it will scale Y and Z, or Y and Z. The same is true if I click down here on the Y axis. If I want to move, I simply click on the axis upon which I want to move and then drag. Now, let's say I want to change the center of my orientation here, change the center of my operation. In that case, I'm going to click this little icon right here. It looks like a padlock, and that unlocks the gizmo. So now I can click this corner here, and I can move the gizmo anywhere I want, and that'll change the center of the operation. So if I click this lock again to lock it down, now my rotations happen from the center of that point. My moves still continue as normal. My rotate and my scale will both continue from that new point. Now, let's say I want to recenter my gizmo in the middle of the object that's currently selected. In that case, I just click this button here, that is go to Unmasked Mesh Center, and that recenters it to the center of the mesh. If portions of my mesh are masked and I click that, it will center to the unmasked portion of the mesh. Now, if I were to click Mesh to Axis, that'll take the entire mesh to the central point. If I unclick that and then unlock it and then go Mesh to Axis, it goes back down to the axis of the object. That was the default position where it started. Now, it's really handy to be able to move multiple objects. So let's say, for example, I want to move multiple subtools. As it stands, I'm only moving the head. Well, if I shift click, that turns off visibility for everything else. And I can manually now turn on visibility, let's say we'll do the teeth and gums, and let's grab the eyeballs. There we are. Nope. There we go, our eyeballs. So we now have visibility turned on the eyeballs, on the teeth, gums, and the body. So if I turn on this button here, which is transpose all selected subtools, if I click and drag, it will now move all of my selected subtools. Now, there's actually another way to accomplish this, which I find a little bit easier to work with. If I shift click on the body again, that will make everything visible. Now, if I Control Shift click on a selection here, in this case the body, and then Control Shift click on other subtools, I've just added the shoulder pads, I'll add the teeth, I'll add the gums, and I'll add the eyes. I'm just Control Shift clicking, and that adds them to this selection. So now I can click and drag to move just those objects. If I want to clear my selection, I Control Shift click and drag off the model, and that clears the selection. So to repeat that, If I Alt-click on a subtool here in the window, it will select that subtool. If I Control-Shift-Click, that will make that my current selection for moving. And then I can Control-Shift-Click on other subtools just here in the window to add them to my selection. So everything will be visible. You'll just get this sort of gradient where you can't quite see all the way through, or you can't quite see the solid object, just to let you know visually that that's not selected. Now I can click and drag move, and I'm moving everybody at once, or everyone that's selected at least. Now we also have what's called sticky mode. Now this is very interesting. I'm going to clear my selection. Let's say I want to turn on sticky mode here, and then I will move the body. Oops, I need to clear my selection. Let's turn off Move Selected Subtools. There we go. So I'm going to move the body. Now because sticky mode is turned on, the gizmo returns to its original position. Now the reasoning behind that is if I were to go select another subtool now, I could go to Stroke, Modifiers, and click Replay Last, and that replays that last stroke. So if I'm continuing from the same position as before, the teeth move the exact same number of units as the head. So it allows you to repeat actions across multiple tools this way. So if I select the gums now, because I'm moving from the exact same spot, if I go to Stroke and then click Replay Last, it moves the gums the exact same number of units over to the left. So that's just a way of repeating movements from an accurate start position. That's sticky mode there. If sticky mode was not turned on, the gizmo would just stay where I moved it along with the object. Now if I click Mesh to Axis, that returns the mesh to the axis position. So it's sort of like a recentering or a homing of the model. If I turn Lock off, then that's just going to move the gizmo. That's true for all of these operations. If lock is off, the gizmo is the only thing that moves. So let's take a look now at how we can use the gizmo to select and mask polygroups. This is quite interesting. We're going to switch to another tool for this. I'm going to go ahead now, go to the tool menu, and let's switch over to the demo soldier, our generic ZBrush soldier. Let's center it on screen, and then we're going to turn on polyframe mode. Polyframe mode is going to show us the polygroups here. I'm going to turn on solo so we only see the body. And when we're in a polyframe mode, remember you can turn line off so you don't see the polyframe itself. You just see the color codes for the individual polygroups. So while you're with gizmo turned on, turn off lock and then control click on a polygroup. And that's going to isolate just that polygroup with a mask. It's going to automatically mask the other polygroups. That's control click. Control click on a polygroup is going to automatically unmask that and leave the others masked. Now it's also possible, I'm going to lock it again and clear my mask. It's also possible to mask based on topology. And this is something that'll be familiar to you from transpose if you used transpose tools before. Topology masking allows you to click and drag to create a mask using the topology of the object, just like so. So basically what I've done is I've unlocked the gizmo, let's move it over here, and I hold down the control key and I click and drag. And what that does now is it makes the mask follow the topology. I'm just dragging my cursor down the length of the model. We'll do it down the leg here. I'll control click and drag, and that starts to mask based on the underlying edge looping. So this is actually really handy to isolate things with masking for posing. I actually prefer to pose using transpose, but I'll show you really quickly. Since we've masked everything but this leg and my gizmo is unlocked, I can position the rotation where the hip joint would rotate. I can lock it, and now I can rotate that leg. We'll do the same thing down here. We'll unlock it, we'll mask down to the knee. Let's move the center, and then we can rotate the knee. Now, it's actually not as effective for doing something like rotating the knee, specifically because of this problem right here. Let's position that joint. Position that joint. There we go. Let's lock it. it creates this really hard-edged kind of bend there. There's a much better way of posing, which we're going to talk about in the next section when we talk about transpose tools. But I just want to show you that it is possible to topology mask using the gizmo, as well as to do some bending and rotating and manipulating of the mesh and posing it using transpose or using gizmo. So let's take a look now at the transpose tools. There's a little bit more to talk about with the gizmo, specifically these primitives here, but we're going to come back to that because now is a good time to look at transpose and talk about posing with transpose. So I'm going to go ahead now and turn off the gizmo icon here. Now you can see my gizmo has become these orange circles. These are the transpose lines. Now these will be familiar to anyone who has used ZBrush before. Transpose does exactly what gizmo does. It's a different way of approaching it. And gizmo has a lot more options than transpose did. But transpose does do some things that gizmo doesn't, specifically mesh posing, which I'm about to show you. So anytime you select move, scale, or rotate, and you've got the gizmo turned off, you'll get these yellow circles. So I'm going to go to move. I want to click and drag on the model and then let go on the background, and that's going to draw a new line with 3 orange circles. I don't want to draw the line and let go on the model because that creates a diagonal line because it's snapping to the mesh underneath. I'm going to click on the model, drag, and let go off the model, and that creates a nice clean straight line. This is my transpose line. If I hold down Shift while I draw it, it'll snap it to an increment. Or if I click one of these axes here, for instance Y or X, or if I rotate it, I can click Z, and that'll lock it to an axis. So if I'm in Move, I will click and drag the center circle, and that moves the object. Let me turn off Solo so we can see the other subtools here. We'll draw a new line, and then click and drag that center circle. You see it moves the subtool in relation to the other subtools. Now, if I click the outer circle here, it's going to shear the object. It's going to squash it. If I click the inner circle, it's going to clip it. This is quite interesting. This is really, really handy when you're doing hard surface modeling. You can basically get a quick and easy version of the clipping brush by using this particular technique. Be aware that it works just like the clip brush, so the same shortcomings, the same rules apply. For example, here, you see we get a little winged face on that arm. We'll talk about that when we start talking about the clip brushes later, but this circle is a shortcut to using a clip brush. So let's say we go to scale now. If I click scale, I'll do the same thing. I'll draw a new line. Now scale doesn't use the center circle. That does this sort of squashing effect. Scale uses the outer circle and the inner circle. The inner circle is the center of the scale, and the outer circle is going to be the operator. So I click and drag the outer circle, and I can scale up and down. The same is true for rotate. If I click rotate, the outer circle rotates around the inner circle, like so. Now if I draw a straight line up and down through the center of the model, like this, if I want to move my line, I click the line itself or click on one of the circles, click on a circle, and I can drag it. I can position the line to the center of the body. Unfortunately, you can't undo positions with the transpose line, so you just got to be careful. You'll have to redo it if you misplace it. So I'm on rotate now. Instead of grabbing the outer circle like this, I'm going to click and drag the center circle, and that rotates around the y-axis. Now, transpose also does topology masking. If I hold the control key down and then click and drag, I can mask based on topology, just like so. Now I'll draw a new line based on the bone inside the leg. I'll move to a side view and click that little circle so I can move it inside the leg. And now I'm just going to grab this circle here, and I'll just bring it back there, and then click and drag, and I can bend that leg. Now I'll draw a new line, and this time I'm going to bend that knee. I don't really need to mask down to the knee because I'm not going to draw the line like this and bend the leg like this, because that only works for hinge joints like the shoulder or the hip. Here I'm going to draw a line, and I'm going to end it at the point that I want my rotation to occur. here in the center of the knee. So I'm going to use the end point of the line, and I am going to hold down the Alt key, and I'm going to click and drag, and that does what's called bone posing. That will stretch along the side I'm rotating away from, and it will compress along the side that I'm rotating towards. So it's a very, very handy tool there. Let's position that again, Alt, click and drag. So it just creates a nice, realistic bend. So now we'll take a look at how to pose multiple subtools using the Z plugin Transpose Master plugin. I'm going to tear this off by clicking the little radial button there. It just defaulted to the opposite side, so I'm actually going to close that, and I'm going to go to Z plugin, and I'm just going to drag this over manually and just dock it on the right hand side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the T-pose mesh button, and that's going to go through all of those subtools, temporarily copy them, and then collapse them down into a new Z tool that has no subtools, but it has all of my base meshes. If I go into polyframe mode, you can see that each individual subtool, well, what was a subtool, now has its own polygroup. So I can very easily Control-Shift-Click to show and hide polygroups. So if I Control-Shift-Click on a polygroup, it hides everything else. This helps me do things like this. If I Control-Shift-Click and drag, it inverts visibility. So I can mask, let's say, the hand stuff, the legs, and then show all again, and then I can mask the lower part of the body. And now I've got a mesh where the accessories on top and the torso are unmasked. So this just allows me to very easily isolate things for posing. So let's say, for example, I want to bend the leg. So I'm going to isolate just the body. We'll turn off frame mode here. I'm going to go to Transpose, turn off the gizmo, so I'm on Transpose, and I'm going to topology mask down to the leg, like so. Now I'm going to invert visibility by Control-Shift-Clicking and dragging. Go into frame mode here, and I'm going to isolate just the bits for the other leg. Make sure you don't accidentally miss any faces like that one right there. The legs on this particular model are actually quite close together, which makes it a little tricky to do this. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to hide those faces there. And I'm going to hide all of this. Now I'm going to invert visibility, and I'm going to hide the body again, and let's mask everything else. There we go. So now I have a model where the leg is unmasked and the costume accessories on that leg are also unmasked. I'll go to Transpose Rotate, draw myself a new transpose line, and then I will go ahead and bend that. Then I'll take the end point of it, place it in the knee, go to Transpose Rotate again, hold down the Alt key, and then I can just bend that knee. And I can take the move brush and make any sort of changes, corrections that I might want to make to the mesh here. There we go. Maybe I just want to fix that forward face there, fix a little bit of the volume there, clear my mask. There we go. Let's say I want to change the orientation of the head. I'll do my transpose mask up to the neck. So I've masked everything but the head and neck. Now I'll invert visibility, and I'll go ahead and mask everything but the goggles. So now the head and the goggles are unmasked. So I can draw a new transpose line here. Bring it inside the neck. And I'll go to rotate, and then I'll just click and drag so I can rotate the head so he's looking off to his right. Maybe I want to raise the head, so I'll just do this. Oops, there's a little bit unmasked there at the back. I got to be careful of that. So I'm going to go ahead and draw another mask here. Just mask marquee the whole body just to make sure that nothing's unmasked there. Now we can turn the head. There we go. Now this also works with X symmetry. So let's say, for example, I want to bend the elbows. I'll transpose mask down to the elbows, but I'll turn on X symmetry first. So I'm getting, oops. So I'm getting my mask on both sides of the body down to the elbows. I'm going to unmask the accessories to the hands. And I'm just going to draw another transpose line just like we did before, ending it at the elbow. I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and I'm going to bend the elbow while I'm in rotate mode. There we go, and you see that it actually bends both elbows. Now I'll clear my mask. So this posing has all been happening on a T-pose mesh. This is a proxy mesh that's been generated by the plugin Sub to Transpose Master. So now I'm going to go back to the Transpose Master menu and I'm going to click T-pose to subtools. This will take the position of each one of these subtools that you see here that has been collapsed together, and it will copy it over to my original demo soldier here. So let's press that button now, T-pose to subtools. It'll go through each one of those and then update its position based on my pose. So you can see now on the new tool, on the new model, each subtool is placed where I had it in my posed version. And I can go through and select these subtools and manipulate them separately. Now in this Transpose Master, there is the potential to turn on layers. So a new layer will be created for each subtool. So you can actually store your pose in layers. If you turn this on, when you transfer the pose back over, it'll create a new layer for each subtool. So you can turn that layer on and off, and that will show or hide the pose for that particular subtool. That can be very handy as well. And we'll talk more about layers in a separate video. Right now we just want to talk about transpose, gizmo, and moving meshes. So now we've seen how to pose using the transpose tools. We'll come back to these a couple times in another video, just as a tool to use to help create a sense of character. We'll use it when we're rendering. If we want to pose a character to give it more sense of presence and dynamicism before we create a final image. So being able to pose your characters inside of ZBrush is super, super important. And I highly recommend using the transpose tools for that because they're much more expressive and easier to work with, and they have capabilities you won't get using the Gizmo. However, the Gizmo is extremely powerful. It's a brand new tool, and it's addressed a whole lot of requests from ZBrush users for many years. So hopefully you see the power of both of these tools and what's useful about one as opposed to about other. So now we've looked at these options at the top bar here, except for this one, transforming and primitives. So we're going to take a look now at creating primitives and creating deformers using the Gizmo. So I'll see you in the next video.